Go ahead and answer that question. We'd like to get some sentiment from you guys. But taking a look at the market right now, BTC, moving down today. We talked about the FOMC thing. Usually things do get volatile around this news going into the FOMC. Obviously coming out of it it sounded like, and Ewok, I'll have you expand on this, but it sounded like Jerome Powell was somewhat, obviously he's always cautious sounding, like he's never going to come out and say like, hey, all systems go, we're all good. He's never going to talk like that. But he did sound hawkish as normal today. Maybe even a bit more as far as how many rate cuts they may or may not do in 2025. People have been betting on 3 or 4, with 4 being the more bullish number, of course, for people. So we'll get into that. Bitcoin drops the whole way to just under 101K right now. It was up at 107, nearly 108 at all-time highs just, yesterday, I think. So We've got that. ETH has moved down with it, of course. It's at 3650 right now. And again, the crypto market as a whole, I mean, you scroll up and down Coin Paprika here and everything's down 6, 7, 12%, so that's where we're at. So yeah, we can kind of probably do 2 birds, 1 stone here with this topic, Ewok. But what are you seeing right now with Bitcoin? The news is largely noise, especially in this environment with the FOMC stuff. But what do you make of the rate cuts today, what Powell may have alluded to, and just how the market's reacting here?
So from what, and I didn't see it live either, but I tried to read up on it a little bit after I was finished with work, and the main sentiment that I got was that Powell suggested there may not be as many rate cuts next year. Someone had mentioned that possibly 2 instead of 4, and I think the market's just responding. But again, not any more than what we talked about potentially happening last week. I said I think we could zip around in this zone for a while until things get settled down a little bit. You look at the Dow as well, and it's down considerably. You're 2.5% there and almost 3% on the S&P. And, again, it's just a reaction, and I think it's across the board. But, you and I talked about this before the stream, and from the initial rate cuts, we had suggested that usually within a few months anyway, there was almost always it could be anywhere from 25 to 45% pullback. Mm-hmm. And, this could technically, because we haven't had one yet, this could technically be that as well. So it could be a combination of things. End of year, people selling off. There's some selling going on to, capture some gains by the end of the year. If people were at a loss, they could be tax harvesting, things like that. So, we're going to see some volatility here as we approach year end. But I think the sentiment that people were expecting a little bit more interest rates cuts for next year, and now we may not get as many of those, could be priced in here as well. So there's a lot of things going on that could all play a little part. But when you got that many little parts, it becomes one big one. You know what I mean? So I think that's kind of what you're seeing. But as far as the Bitcoin chart goes, we're still in that range. We're still chopping around. You were right. Yesterday we did get up over 108,000, and we pulled back 7,000 since then. Basically, we're right at 100K. But again, I think now's the time where we see if this 100K level, either it gets broken through or it uses it as support finally, instead of just having trouble getting up through it. So it's a critical time to see that as well. So I think everything's looking good. Ethereum, let's take a look at that dominance that we keep paying attention to. It has fallen way back down as well. Bitcoin went on a little run. We were almost at the 0.04 level here just a week ago, and now we're back down pushing that 0.03 level again. So we just can't get a nice stable run on that yet. But again, it's still pretty early. The majority of the full bull market hasn't even happened yet. And when it takes off, Bitcoin's a lot heavier than ETH is. So when that time does come, prepare for ETH to start making some big moves compared to what Bitcoin is, because Bitcoin's in uncharted territory. And as I said, it's very heavy. It's hard to move that price unless, but obviously, we know there are billions and billions of dollars coming in and out every day. So yeah, I mean, it's looking good. I mean, again, pullbacks never hurt anybody. It's healthy. It's healthy to stabilize it as long as we don't break a major trend. We're looking fine.
Yeah, I think you bring up an interesting point about the 100K mark for BTC. I mean, that's been the coveted target for years now. Like, people talked about it. I mean, honestly, they even talked about it as like, could that be the next high for the next bull market even? Clearly, that's been surpassed already, and I think we'll probably go relatively far beyond that. But yeah, that's going to be the key number, and we're sitting at it right here now. This will be the test. Will it actually hold it? And I agree with you. I mean, the stuff that's happening with the FOMC today is largely just short-term noise that we don't need to think too much about. There was a good question by Billy Slime here a minute ago. Why do markets dip after cuts? I thought cuts were good. So as far as like this happening right now today, intraday, I mean, I don't know that the dip today is so much in response to the 25-point cut, because that was like literally 95% of people were expecting that. Yeah. So I think that part was baked in. I think it was more, and I don't have the words in front of me, but just the sentiment and kind of what Powell put out there. It's always his speech. Honestly, it's very rarely, and we learned this over the rate hikes over the last few years, it's very rarely what the maneuver is that they do. Because usually, I'd say 9 times out of 10, whatever the market is thinking, that's what they end up doing. You usually don't get caught off guard like, holy shit, they did a 50-point hike instead of a 25. It's usually not that bad. They usually nail that. It's how he sounds in his speech after it, and everybody, and they put out a document too in a PDF that like kind of tells you how they're looking. I think it was more in response to that, where they're not looking at making as many cuts next year as people maybe would have thought. We'll see. I mean, the Fed is their own mafia. They'll do whatever the hell they want to do. I was going to say we'll see what happens when, because Trump obviously will be in office by then, and I'm sure Powell hates him, and Trump isn't a huge fan either. So, but the Fed is really who runs the country. I mean, they run the monetary policy, and we're at their mercy a bit. So, yeah.
Well, and to that point of Billy's question, I think what he may be referring to is the comment that I made from when the interest rates are going up, they keep raising, and then the pivot. I should have worded it differently, but when the pivot happens, there is traditionally a major pullback sometime after that. That's 25 to 45% of all the markets, and we hadn't seen that, and it's usually delayed. Go back historically when rates have gone up and then they pivoted. Look what happens to the chart. Several days or several. I guess it's usually within a few months of that happening is when you get that major pullback as a correction. So that's what I was referring to, not necessarily just today's rate cuts.
I gotcha. You mean the overall pivoting? Yeah, I understand
right.
what you're saying.
Right.
Yeah, so it'll remain to be seen, kind of the response to that. But traditionally here, I don't think this is going to last for long. We're going to see this dip for a little bit. We got 2 weeks until 2024 is over here. So I think we're going to see this dip here for another few days. And I think going into Christmas, we're going to start to see things move up really, really well. And then going into January, I think all bets are off. I think we're going to see things really, really start to get going, and especially Ethereum and the alts, because that's the only thing that hasn't gotten going yet, really. So